Yves Benoit is our next speaker. He received his PhD in 1983 from Paris 7, Paris 7. I won't tell any more jokes, but when Yves and I were talking, I realized that that was the year that he got his PhD was the year that I taught at Orsay. I taught the Dag 1, and that is where Yves is now, Paris 11, Paris 11. He will give the second talk in the series Stationary Measures on Finite Volume Homogeneous Spaces. So, Yves.
I will just speak on action on tori. So Jean-François gave the result in the general setting, and I will just, in this talk, give the whole proof for the action on the two torus. So the setting is, as you have seen, we have what I will call A, included in the two Bantu matrices with integer coefficient and determinant plus or minus 1. So it's a finite set. And mu will be a probability measure on this finite set. Such that A is the support of mu. And the gamma will be the group generated by this finite set. So I want to study, as we have seen, the action of these finitely many matrices on the torus T2. So the action on T2. So let me have a very concrete example. A is just two matrices, G and H. And G is the matrix 1, 1, 1, 0. And H is the matrix 0, 1, 1, 1. So the action on the two torus is given by, I send the couple of real modulo integers. T2 is R2 divided by Z2. And I send it to, so it's the usual action, x1 plus x2, x1, and this second one sends x1, x2 onto the couple x2, x1 plus x2. Okay, and the theorem so we assume that gamma is not solvable here, non-elementary, not solvable. So it's an assumption gamma. And So the theorem that Jean-François explained in this case is any atom-free mu stationary measure, probability measure nu on X, on the two torus, is the R probability measure. So I have to define the word. So I have to define atom-free. Atom-free means I have a probability measure on the two torus. This means that it doesn't give weights to points. So every point has 0 mass. I have to define stationary. So stationary, this means that stationary means that the convolution of mu with nu is equal to nu, where, as Jean-François defined, mu convolution with nu was just the average of the push forward of nu, and you do the average, you push nu by all the elements of, sorry, there is no G, it's a set, either you put A or gamma, because mu has support A, and you consider the push forward of the probability measure by all the elements of A, and you do an average according to the low mu. Okay, so this is the definition of the convolution. For instance, so to be stationary means to be fixed point of convolution by mu. And for instance, if nu is gamma invariant, then it is automatically stationary. So as example of a stationary measure, you have here example of stationary measure are nu equal the Dirac mass at 0, but this one, because it is invariant, the point 0 on the two torus is invariant by this linear action, but this probability measure, it's an atom, so it's not atom-free. Another example of stationary measure is nu, which is dx1, dx2 in coordinate, which is what I called R. It's a R measure. This is R. So, and this theorem tells you that mainly those are the only example of stationary probability measure. So I will just, in this talk, prove this theorem by a method which works in very general setting as we had in the previous talk. This theorem, in fact, is due to Bourgain, Fuhrmann, Lindenstrauss, and Moses. And as Jean-François explained, their method was through the analysis of the Fourier coefficient of the probability nu. So they used harmonic analysis. And we use ergodic theory on X. So we concentrate on studying the random walk on X given by mu. And as Jean-François explained, this kind of result implies a classification of orbit closure, equidistribution of finite orbit, and so on. Okay, so I want to prove this theorem. And first, I have to recall classical work by Furstenberg. So what I will call the Bernoulli dynamical system. So it will be very nice, this Furstenberg result, because we want to prove this theorem which describes something which is a mu stationary, so one probability measure, and we don't know how to handle this condition of being fixed point. So it's not really being invariant, but being invariant after doing some average of push forward. So it looks very much like some harmonic condition. And what Furstenberg will give you as an output is in fact a whole family of probability measure, a kind of equivariant family of probability measure that we will call nu B. And after that, we will just study these nu B. So let me explain what the nu B are. So the Bernoulli dynamical system, it's B S beta. So now you know why I have called the support of my measure A, because A is for alphabet. So I will think of the support of mu as an alphabet. And B will be A, so the infinite word, B0, B1, and so on, with Bi in my alphabet. And S will be the shift. So if you take an infinite word in my alphabet, I remove the first letter. This is the action of the shift. And beta is just the product measure, so the Bernoulli measure. So it's a classical strategy when you want to study a random walk. A priori, it's a random dynamical system, to transform it in like that in a deterministic dynamical system on a symbolic space. What I'm doing. So, and what is the first? I will quote two theorems by Furstenberg. So for beta almost every B in B. So Furstenberg has this very nice idea to look at so he starts from some stationary measure, nu. Nu is stationary, this one. It's general in any space, but I just quote it here. And he look at the push forward of this nu by a random word, B0, Bn, but he does it in the reverse order. So he does it in this order, B0, Bn. So those are elements in my alphabet, so in my group. Those are elements of SL2Z. Here I have a probability measure, sorry, nu B equal the limit for n infinity. So I have my probability measure nu, which live on the two torus. And I push this probability by a long word. But in this order, I don't push first by B0, then B1, and so on, then Bn. Because if I do it that way, in the other way, then at each time I push again, I put some randomness. Here, the randomness is at the very beginning. So the limit is in that condition. And what Furstenberg tells you is that if you put that in this order, this limit exists. Almost everywhere. So you get limit probability measure. And I will very soon give you an example where you can get the feeling why it does exist. But the proof is very simple, in fact. The proof is just, okay, look at that. In fact, it's a martingale. If you think of that as a map from B to the set of probability measure on X, it's a martingale. So martingale has a limit almost everywhere. And it's a martingale because nu is stationary. And what does Furstenberg tells you also? It tells you that you have equivariance property for this nu B. If you look, if you compare nu B and nu for the shift of B, when you remove the B1, but you look at the definition, and when you remove the first letter, B0, then you get a nu SB. So this means that you have this following equivariance property of the nu B. You can compare the nu B and the nu SB just by pushing forward by your element of SL2Z. So those are relations between this family of probability on the two torus. And the other nice thing, which is also very easy to prove, is that in fact nu can be recovered by when you know the nu B. So nu is just the average of the nu B with respect to the Bernoulli measure. So nu B are probability measure on the two torus. I can make average of them, and I get a probability measure on the two torus. But this is just the, if you think of this equality, it's just pushing this equality. If you can write this equality with B naught and then B naught B1 and so on. And so that's just, again, stationarity. Okay? And now I want to quote the second theorem of Furstenberg. So that's nice. That's nice. I have transformed my problem about studying one probability measure by equivalent family of probability measures satisfying this condition. Because more or less it's equivalent. If you have such a family, then if you take this average, you will get a stationary measure. The second statement, again due to Furstenberg, is about the specific situation of 2x2 matrices. And it's again a statement which is true almost everywhere. And it has to do with it has to do with the sequence. You want to study what is this dynamical system good for. You want to study product B0, Bn. So you want to study the random walk associated to this probability measure mu. So you want to make product Bn, B0. But here, as I explained to you, Furstenberg got this idea that it's simpler to study B0, Bn, and it's kind of equivalent. So he studied this product B0, Bn of matrices. So those are just a random product of matrices. So they tend to go to infinity. So maybe we can divide by the norm. So we have a sequence of matrices of norm 1. But when you are doing that, you are adding random term on the right. So this sequence of matrices, they are of norm 1, they stay in some compact set, but they don't have any reason to converge anywhere. But the point is that the randomness, you add it on the right. So they do not converge because you add the randomness on the right. But on the left, you don't add any randomness. So if you take a cluster value of this sequence, it will be a matrix which will be no more invertible. So here in indication 2, it will be a rank 1 matrix. And the image of this matrix will not depend on the cluster value. So all cluster value pi of that have same image. Which is, I call it VB, which is a line in my vector space V. Did I define V? V is R2. My vector space. So I have a random family of lines, which correspond to kind of the direction of expansion after applying my word B, or if you want, the direction of contraction if I apply successively B0 minus 1, B1 minus 1, and so on, in this order. So they have same image, and they satisfy equivariant property. You can relate this line for the random parameter B with the line for the random parameter SB, shifted. It's just look at the definition. If you define this VSB, you just start with B1. B1, Bn over norm of B1, Bn. So you apply B0 and you get the definition of VB. Okay. Now, so maybe I make some remark. One we have already seen is that if nu is gamma invariant, I would like to explain, because they will play a very important role in the proof, I would like to give you a feeling of what the nu B are. So I will give you two different situations where we see what the nu B are. Okay. So one is when nu is a gamma invariant. What are the nu B when nu is gamma invariant? So I get the nu B as limit of pushing nu by an element of gamma. So those are equal to nu. So there are no limits. I mean, there is a limit, but the limit is, in this case, nu B is equal to nu. So you have no randomness there in this situation. And a second case, which is kind of opposite, is the case where gamma is a Schottky group acting on the projective line, projective space of R2. So I will just draw a picture. So here is kind of my space. And Schottky group, this means that I'm able to send I have two generators, say G and H as before. Maybe they are not given by the formula I given, but okay. And G send a big part of my space into a smaller one, and H takes the same big part and send it to a smaller one, which is this joint. So, and mu, say, is, for instance, 1/2 the Dirac mass in G plus the Dirac mass in H, as I had, I could have chosen. And so, what is this convolution equation here? What does it mean? What is nu? This convolution equation tells you that nu is equal to 1/2 G star nu plus H star nu. This is my equation. So what is nu? So there, as Jean-François explained, there is always on a compact space at least one stationary measure. And here we will see that it will be unique. And because of this Schottky action. And we see at the very beginning, because because of this formula, nu have to give mass 1/2 to the left-hand side and mass 1/2 to the right-hand side. And then you go on, you get two smaller parts. Here it's the image of GG. Here is the image of GH. And here is the image of the word HG. And here is the image of the word HH. And all these pieces will get a mass 1/4. And then each species, if I apply again my, will be divided in two pieces. And what you see, this piece corresponds to GGG, and this piece corresponds to GGH, and so on. So, and what you see is this idea of Furstenberg, that when you know the beginning of the word, and a long part of the beginning of the word, you know more and more accurately where is the image of nu. So from this picture, you get that nu is kind of Bernoulli supported in this limit counter set. And this limit nu b will be a Dirac mass at the point corresponding to this word B0, Bn. Okay, so this is to have a feeling of the two opposite situations of a stationary measure. Okay, so now I have to go on. I want to prove the theorem that I am just erasing, and the key lemma. It's for beta almost every b in B, my limit probability measure nu b is VB invariant. So let me draw a picture. This is my two torus, T2. On it I have a nu b when it corresponds to this symbolic parameter b. And on it, for the same b, I have also a random direction, VB. And the key lemma tells you that nu b is invariant by translation in this direction. So it's clear that the key lemma implies a theorem. Because for beta almost every b, for almost every b, this direction will be irrational. So nu b because almost surely nu B, VB is irrational. So a probability measure on the two torus, which is invariant by translation in an irrational direction, then it has to be R, because the stabilizer is a closed subgroup. So and since nu is average of nu B, nu is also R. Okay, so now I have to prove the key-lemma, to explain to you how I prove the key-lemma. So for that, I have to improve my Bernoulli dynamical system. This Bernoulli dynamical system has been introduced to study random walk, but random walk for just in G. Here I have to act on X also. So I have to look at a fiber dynamical system. So it will be B cross X, the product of the Bernoulli by the two torus. The transformation, I will call it T, and there will be some invariant measure. I didn't say, but beta, the Bernoulli was invariant by the shift. Here there will be an invariant measure, I will call it beta nu. So what is the definition of T? So T from B cross X to itself, T of Bx. So on the symbolic part, I remove the first letter, so it's just the shift. I keep the first letter in my pocket, and I let it act on X. But I put -1 for some purpose I will not really explain. Okay, so this is my dynamical system. So if I iterate power, I will have then the action of B0 -1, B1 -1, B2 -1, and so on. So it is really this dynamical system when I iterate it, which describes the random walk on X. And what will be this beta nu? So the idea to define beta nu is to keep this, this picture with us. And also to have an invariant probability measure. So, yes, I think that I will have my space as before. So my space B cross X is copies of two torus, parameterized by symbolic word. So there is a copy B cross X, and there is a copy corresponding to the shift of B. And then when the action of T send one copy to the other one, and the formula, as I explained, is given by the inverse of B0. That's the formula for T on this copy. And but you remember on this copy I have two things. First, I have a random direction, VB, and also I have nu B. And on this copy, I have also two things. I have a random direction, VSB, and also I have this probability nu SB. So I really want to have on this fiber the probability nu b. So that's why I choose for a probability on b cross x a probability measure which over the point b the conditional measure is a nu b. So it is this average. This is the definition of the probability measure I choose in my dynamical system. And it's easy to see that T star of beta nu is equal to beta nu because so this probability measure is invariant because we have seen that B naught minus 1 sends this probability to this one. And it has also, it will be very important for the sequence, it has also the property of sending VB to VSB. So it really sends this picture to this picture. So that will be very nice. So I want to prove that nu B is invariant in this direction. So for that, I will use a trick which that we use in this random situation, but which has been used before in a deterministic situation by Katok-Spatzir, I think Katok, Einsiedler, and Eden-Strauss. And the trick is to introduce the conditional measure of nu B along this direction, VB. So I want to study this probability measure, nu B. So what I do is I disintegrate them along the fiber. So I get a map which goes from, which will be very important. So that's the disintegration of the measure nu B. So a map from my space where I have my dynamical system, B cross X, inside the radon measure on R. Okay, which sends Bx to what I will call sigma. So this map I call it sigma, sigma of Bx. And so what is this measure? It is a conditional measure of nu B. When I take this conditional measure on the leaf, X plus VB. So this gives me a measure on the leaf X plus VB. So X plus VB is a, you see, it's a leaf kind of R, which is irrational on the two torus. And I can identify this leaf with R. So for that, I have to make some choices that I will explain just now. So I have to choose an identification of R with the leaf of the form X plus TVB. So what is small VB? So I should have chosen before. We have chosen VB in this line, VB of norm 1. Okay. So since I make this choice, it's a unique up to sign. And it allows me to identify the fiber with the real. So instead of getting a measure here, I get a measure on the real. So what is nice is that this way I can see this conditional measure as a measure on a fixed space. Okay, so I recall what the conditional measure is. It's just disintegrating. When you disintegrate a measure, if you have a measure in any product, you can, to integrate function with respect to this measure, you can first integrate along some measure on the leaf and then integrate on the basis. You have some kind of Fubini. So the measure on the leaf you get are called the conditional measures. That's what is here. So what does our kelema become? The new kelema in this term of sigma, if I want nu b to be invariant by translation along the leaf, just means that the conditional measures are just Lebesgue measure. So the kelema prime is for beta almost every b, for beta nu almost every bx in b cross x, sigma of bx, which is a measure on R, a random measure on the real, is Lebesgue measure. So it's invariant by translation. So that's what I want to prove. I want to prove this kelema. Okay, so now I will try to explain how we prove this kelema. So we will use two properties of this map sigma, which are quite natural. That's the number. Oh. So this part I will call it the exponential drift. It is what is the trick to prove this? So what do you know about sigma? There is something which is quite clear, is that when I change the base point on the leaf, you see, to compute this conditional measure, I have to identify the leaf with R. So if I take two different points on the leaf, like here and here, then the identification with R is not exactly the same. It's up to some translation. So the first remark is that on a set E included in B cross X of full measure for the measure beta nu, in fact, sigma, if I compute sigma of Bx plus T VB. So if I compute sigma on a point on the same leaf as Bx, I will get the same thing that if I compute it in Bx, except that I have a small translation by minus T. So this is an equality between measure on the real and tau t. What is tau t? It's just a translation on R. The map which sends S to S plus T. Okay. So this is the first property. What do I want to prove? I want to prove that almost everywhere, the measure I have here is Lebesgue measure. So I have to prove that it is invariant by small translation. Here I remark that if I am doing a small translation of my measure, I get the sigma at the point which is nearby on the same leaf. So how I will prove that this measure is invariant by small translation? I will try to find 2 points which are on the same leaf and for which sigma takes the same value. And in some sense, I will kind of forget what is the meaning of this map. I will just remember this map. And now I will try to find, here is the second property for sigma. But to state it, I have to say something about VB. Okay? Note, there exists a map theta from B to the real such that, you see, if I look at the image of B naught, if I look at on each line VB, I have chosen a vector of norm 1. So if I take the vector corresponding to the shift of B, if I apply B naught, I get a point on the line corresponding to B. So it will be a multiple of VB. But it will be a multiple by a real number, and I take its logarithm and I call it theta of B. So theta of B, you can think of it, yeah, that's the way it multiplies the norm of vector on VB. So you can define, so because of this equivalence property here, and because T sends the direction VB to the direction VSB, and since I am disintegrating with respect to this direction, I have the second remark that in fact, if I compute sigma at the point T of Bx, it's the same as sigma computed at the point Bx, except, so I have sent this direction in the good direction, but maybe I have this expansion by this factor e to the theta. So these two measures on R, maybe they are not equal, but you go from one to the other by this homoscedcy. I will forget about the sign in this to simplify. So this is the formula which tells you how I can compute a sigma at the image point. So if I can do it once, I can do it n times. So I can compute sigma at t to the n of bx as being e to the theta n of b star sigma of bx. What is theta n? It's just the Birkhoff sum associated to B. So each time, from going to Bx to T of Bx to T square of Bx, I have to take an homoscedcy on R of ratio e to the theta B, e to the theta SB, and so on. Okay. Now, Now the idea of this exponential drift is to note that this map, this dynamical system T is not one-to-one. Because you forget about B naught, and B naught is one letter of the alphabet. So say if the alphabet has 2 elements, this map will be 2-to-1. So if you know sigma at the point Bx, then you will know its value at its image, but then you will know its value at its inverse image back. So you can compute sigma on the fibers T minus n Tn of Bx. So I would like to give a parametrization of the fiber. So the elements which have same image by T to the n as Bx. So those will be a set of elements, maybe I will call them A HnBx, there is n and Bx. And they will be parameterized by word of length n that I will call A. So there will be a symbolic part, which is I just remove the first letter of, if you look, you have to look at the formula for T. So I forget about the first letter of B. And I replace them by A. And then I have to adjust so that X will have the correct image. So it's just you let A naught, this matrix A naught An minus 1 act on Bn minus 1 minus 1, B0 minus 1 X. So for a word of length n. So this is the fiber. I will call that A SNBI. Sometime I will call it just B prime. And this will just be maybe X prime. For the picture I want to draw now, I will just have time to draw this picture. So what do? We start with the point X, and then I take points nearby, xp. So xp, so x will be in my two torus, and xp will be nearby. So this means it will be of the form x plus vp, and vp goes to 0. So these are the point I'm starting with in some copy of x. I think of it as being some copy b cross x. And I apply t. Some number of times, n times, and I come back. And I get here 2 to the n element in the fiber. So I get a point x prime here, which is this element here, which has, so that I am here in some b prime cross x. There are 2 to the n possibility for b prime. So to each point here, there are 2 to the n possibilities. And here, xp is very near x, so there is this small vector vp. And in the fiber, I consider the fiber of the point x and the fiber of the point xp. So xp will have a fiber here. I will call it x prime p, the corresponding point. and there will be some vector v prime p. In the fiber, I get, corresponding to the same parameter A, I get x prime p, which is x prime plus v prime p. And what is the formula for v prime p? It is just given here, but it's action of A0, AN minus 1 applied to Bn minus 1, minus 1, B0 minus 1, Vp. Okay. So this vector is going to 0. And now I have to say how I choose n. I choose n depending on p, such that this vector, the vector Vp will go to 0, will be more and more near. So I have to wait time, one way and back. So I will start with a small vector and apply matrices. And some of them are quite random. So I expect the size of the vector to increase. So I wait up to the time where this will have some kind of fixed value, small but fixed value. So such that, and the precise formula will be such that e to the theta n of b times the norm of bn minus 1 b0 minus 1 vp is of size some epsilon 0 fixed up to some constant. So what will happen now? We have finished. We have finished because this vector will be more and more near from one another. So sigma will take almost the same value there. So I have formula which tells me how to compute sigma on the fiber, going there and here. So I will see that sigma will take the same value at these 2 points. But these 2 points, and then I will take limit when p goes to infinity. But then if you look at the direction of this vector, it goes to the direction of the leaf, by definition. So you get 2 points which are on the same leaf and on which sigma has the same value. So this will be the beginning of the invariance of sigma and proving that sigma is Lebesgue. For sure, something is kind of wrong here because I'm taking some kind of limit. Nothing is continuous. So I have to be sure that I stay in some I have just measurable functions. So what I have to say is that, OK, it's a measurable function, but it's continuous on a set of large measures. And that I have to be sure that on my fiber, I am able to have point on this set of large measures. So we get that with the Martingale theorem. But then there are trouble because maybe the norm here of the vector is maybe not exactly what I have given by this formula, because this formula does not depend on A. So I don't have to take the whole fiber, but just piece of fiber where theta n of A S n b minus theta n of b is bounded, let's say by 1. So it's much smaller piece of fiber. Instead of having 2 to the n element, you just have 2 to the n over square root of n element. So you have to prove equidistribution of this piece of fiber. And so there are some kind of technicalities, but I think I have given the main thread of ideas there in our proof. So thank you.
questions? Yes.
So, I mean, yeah, in the general case of G modulo gamma, this is how you obtain this invariance by unipotent element,
Yes,
and then you use Ratner, is it?
yes. If we are not working in the torus, if we are working on SL2 over SL2 there, then we apply Ratner. Sure.
But where do you use the Zariski clause is semi-simple? Like, where do you need this?
Where do we use the fact that you see we have to play this random walk of matrices. So we when we look at these large words, I mean we apply all first order result, positivity of lambda 1 and so on, which are for random walk, or which are of group which are Zariski-Dent in semi-simple groups. Random walk and solvable groups are much more complicated.
Other questions? Yes.
So in this setting, you have a point-wise description. If you take X and B, you can put the orbit of X under B and see how it distributes. You have
Thanks.
descriptions for all X and almost every B.
Yes. Yes. So what there's a game you can play, which is starting from X on the two torus, but X not rational. And then, but for any X. And then take a random word B. And then just look, so starting from X, you choose either GX or HX with weight 1/2, but just one of them. And then go on, starting from this one, take one of them, that's GX, and then maybe later on HGX, which is another point. And so at random, you choose either H or G. And so with this kind of strategy, we can prove that this sequence under this condition is equidistributed.
At most, one more question. Well, let's thank the speaker again for a very nice talk.